Now, what was very interesting is that there are multiple books and multiple metrics which are available on an international platform, but none of those trainers and book writers and authors had ever come and studied the Indian workplace. After training about 60,000 people across Asia, most of them Indians, I realized that there was something more to be done. So I started my research. Research took me 3 years. I spoke to about 120 senior leaders of corporate India, many industrialists, venture capitalists, partners of private equity firms, participants, heads of HR, learning heads. So I wanted to understand it from every angle, business, HR, learning, even a lot of senior participants. So finally, I did the research and it was very interesting. One aspect of the research which really I want to share with you is that every time I spoke to somebody about executive presence, they knew people who had it. They also knew when people had it, and they also knew when people didn't have it. But it was so nebulous, so mystifying that they were unable to define it. So if you ask them, give me names of 3 people who have executive presence, they would say, Raghuram Rajan has it, Sachin Tendulkar has it, Ratan Tata has it, Anand Mahindra definitely has it. And on international platform, it would always be Barack Obama, Indra Nooyi, so the same names again and again. But if you ask them what were the qualities of executive presence and what did they think was executive presence, there was there were a lot of gray areas and they were unable to define it. So I really felt that it was time for an Indian author. My first book is, I always like to say, it's a book that is going to take you from the classroom to the cubicle. And this book is going to take you from the cubicle to the corner office. And finally, I think I will have to write a third book, but not now, maybe another couple of years. So what exactly is executive presence? Finally, I got it down to a formula, put all the research together. About 60 of those business leaders have shared their perspective on various aspects of executive presence in the book. But finally, it came down to what I call as the POISE formula, where the P stands for your physical presence, the O stands for your online presence, the I stands for your influencer presence, the S stands for your stage presence, and the E stands for your engagement presence. So I'm going to discuss each of these. After each letter, we can take a couple of minutes off. And if you want to share a perspective in the chat box, Arun, of course, is going to be managing the chat box. It'll be wonderful to hear your perspective on it or your views, and you can share it. So I'm going to quickly dive into the formula, which is physical presence. What exactly is physical presence? I broke it up into 2 parts. There is a A and there is a B. The A is your visual resume or your attire. Interestingly, I realized that clothes create impact. The human brain is constantly thin slicing and passing judgments. So when we meet somebody, some of us are more vocal about it, some of us internalize it and don't share it. But within microseconds of meeting a complete stranger, our prejudices, our biases, our past experiences, we use all of that to pass judgment. And clothes are an integral component of that. It may be the tip of the iceberg. It may be an integral component of first impression, but they definitely matter. A lot of research has been done by social scientists on this. One or two, a couple of them I'm going to share with you. One, of course, was that clothes have a psychological impact on the wearer. They made young students where it was a study group. So they made young students wear lab coats for 1 week. And they studied the behavior of the students. Interestingly, all those who wore a lab coat and went to college, their attention to detail and hygiene increased tremendously. So I'm never convinced when people tell me working from home, we can wear track pants and t-shirts, because I do believe that there's a psychological aspect to attire. Clothes affect the way we think. There are work clothes and there are chill mode clothes. So if you're going to wear track pants and sit, I'm not so sure, I'm not a believer of that. Second aspect of it is, of course, that we pass judgment on credibility, on capability, on economic strata and your ability to get the work done based on how you are dressed. When you are dressed formally, you tend to think in a particular way. And when you are dressed informally, you tend to think in a particular way. A Columbia professor did a research on this interesting element by inviting young boys to a half-an-hour session on networking, and the dress code said formal. All the boys showed up in blazers, full pants, formal shoes. They all helped themselves to a glass of wine or whiskey, and they discussed international politics, global warming, and various issues. Next year, they didn't know they were a part of an experiment. They received the exact same invite, but the dress code said informal. All of them showed up in track pants, floaters. Everybody helped themselves to a can of beer. Everybody slouched and sat down on a chair, and they discussed gossip and various frivolous topics. What had changed? Just one word. So I'm firmly convinced that it may be the packaging, but then packaging also matters. Companies, after all, spend billions of dollars on changing the color of their logo, and they completely understand that packaging matters. So that's part A of the physical presence. So yes, to dress appropriately, to be impeccably groomed, and to understand which industry you belong to. People always give me the example of Mark Zuckerberg, the famous Facebook man. I think personally, Mark is a marketing genius. When he started Facebook, his audience was young college students, and Mark himself dressed like one. Hoodies, floaters, jeans which had never seen the inside of a washing machine. The minute he went to a $50 billion IPO, very quickly he moved to gray pants and gray t-shirts. And when the US Senate called Mark for data privacy, he took no chances. He wore a $4,000 Canali suit, a white shirt, a very nice silk tie, the same color as the Facebook logo, formal shoes, and was impeccably groomed. So I think it's important to understand that even the successful tech billionaires completely understand that packaging matters. When Steve Jobs launched each of his products, he was in that same black cashmere turtleneck, fitted blue jeans, handcrafted Italian shoes. And that was his look. And somehow it blended so beautifully with the products that he was launching. So I think it matters, packaging matters. The second aspect of it is a non-verbal communication, or what we commonly call as body language. It's interesting, but you know, we spend so much time on verbal, but we never spend any time on understanding non-verbal cues. We've never been trained. Indian academic system has a lot of strengths, but this is one area that I think we can definitely put in our academic system, which is how do we study, or how do we analyze, or how do we even become aware of the non-verbal cues that people are sending us. Finally, I realized that there was a body language of a winner. And interestingly, it's no longer just confined to the business world. If you look at politicians, they spend so much time, energy, and resources on perfecting their body language. In fact, US presidents always retain a body language expert who studies their videos to show where they have excelled and what are the areas that they can upgrade. Bill Clinton had a hand gesture which was taking away from his credibility and confidence. And finally, his body language experts came up with a gesture which they said, you have to use this to actually show people that you are honest, credible, and trustworthy. So yes, it's important. Even athletes understand that. I don't need to activate the audio to tell you which is the winning athlete if I show you any photograph of any sport. Even musicians understand that, because finally, when you switch off the music in a piano judging contest, there was no music. All they saw was pianists sitting and playing a piece. And interestingly, the audience could pick out the winner purely on the posture and the hand movements. So clearly, our body is sending out multiple signals which are not sometimes synchronized with our words. And I think this is one interesting aspect that I figured out. That you know something? People with executive presence can read their audience. What do I mean by read? They can see facial expressions. They can read gestures. They can also go micro expressions, like a fleeting expression on the face, or could be reading eyes, or could be also reading just a tilt of the face or a tilt of the mouth, or even something very small, like a little bit of a shift or a movement. So the ability to read your audience is a very important leadership skill. And interestingly, I realized that some of the people I interviewed focused a lot and spoke a lot about it. So they are able to judge the room and judge the energy in the room, even the way people smile. Interestingly, we feel smile is of happiness, but there's an awkward smile, there's an embarrassed smile. One leader even told me that he analyzes everybody who walks in through the room, especially when it comes to mergers and acquisitions and international partners, for a lot of deception. He said, I can spot liars. And I asked him, how do you do that? He said, purely based on body language signals, the way they move, the words they use, the way they move their body, the way they take away eye contact. He said, in fact, sometimes I have noticed that excessive eye contact is also a sign of lying. And if I go back to the famous Mark Zuckerberg video when he was called by the US Senate again, I would request you to go online and see it. You'll be shocked to see that while his words are all correct, but his body language is just not synchronized by what he's saying. He is fidgety, he is shifty. He sweats a lot, he keeps wiping his brow. He takes gulps of water which go down his neck in little lumps of water that he's trying to desperately swallow. He does not maintain enough eye contact. So multiple signals which you would see are completely not synchronized with his body language. So I think it's important to understand that we are constantly sending signals. An integral component of body language is eye contact. It's culture, but in our culture, we carry a lot of emotional baggage when it comes to eye contact. Lots of Western cultures, they maintain direct eye contact. In our culture, direct eye contact has never been a part of our culture. And culture is strong. 10,000 years old. Globalization is only 20 years old. Of course, it's very powerful, it's very strong. But when you take something which is 20 years old and impose it on something which is 10,000 years old, there is bound to be confusion. And this shows up very well when it comes to eye contact and Indians. In our culture, we had multiple rules of eye contact. We had rules like the lower caste couldn't look into the eyes of the upper caste. When you were growing up, you were told, don't stare at grandparents. Showing respect is by lowering your eyes. Poor people couldn't look into the eyes of the rich people. Men, women were not maintaining direct eye contact. So we had multiple unwritten rules on eye contact. In today's workplaces, direct eye contact signals, I'm serious, I mean business. And the interesting bit is that there is no hierarchy when it comes to eye contact. In a face-to-face meeting, it's 50% of the time. But the sad part is that on a Zoom screen, we have moved that percentage to 80%. That, I think, would explain why, at the end of a long day of video chats, most of us have very tired eyes and all of us are suffering from a dry eye syndrome because the eye contact has become almost like staring, which honestly is very unhealthy. So one piece of health advice to everybody in the room: take occasional breaks and blink frequently to return the fluid to your eyes, because a Zoom screen is not ideal when it comes to eye contact. Posture matters. There is a posture of a leader: square shoulders, body evenly balanced. On the other hand, when people are nervous, they are fidgety, they compress their body. Leaders take up space. That is another interesting thing I realized. Regardless of their height, body weight, or size, they take up a lot of space physically in a room. So they would spread their chair out. Interestingly, they always get to sit at the head of the table. They have a lot of paraphernalia lying around them. People give them also more space, and they are, after all, cubicles are smaller than corner offices. So yes, they do get a lot of space. But the interesting bit is that they also take up space when they leave the room. They take up a lot of volume of space in people's minds long after they are gone. So your ability to do that definitely is a non-verbal communication that carries through way after you have left the room. So that's the physical presence. We'll just take a break for a minute, Arun, in case you want to run the poll or just share something which is in the chat box. I would love to hear from.
There's a question from Sham. It says, casual dress appears to be the new norm in most workplaces, especially IT. What are your thoughts?
My thoughts are that I have trained a lot of senior leaders who are selling international contracts for large multinational corporations operating out of India as well as overseas. I would say that if you're going to activate the video, please be at least well groomed and well dressed and ready for business. Because when you dress, the simple non-verbal signals you send out are: one, I mean business. Two, I have shown you respect by dressing. Regardless of what your client is wearing, you definitely need to be at least well groomed and dressed to the best of your ability. And also, I feel that you never dress for yourself, you dress for your audience. Let me give you an example. When you walk into a hotel, depending on how much you are paying, your expectations of what the wait staff will wear is very dependent on that. If you're going to get that 10 rupees cup of chai at the Nukkad, what do you expect the guy to wear? Nothing. He's shabbily dressed, looks like he hasn't washed those clothes for days, and you have no expectation, because when you pay 10 rupees, what do you expect? The only thing you expect is that the tea should be warm. When you pay 70 rupees and go to Cafe Coffee Day, now you have expectations. AC should work, there should be hygiene standards. The guy should wear a clean black t-shirt, black trousers, an apron that's not too dirty or stuffy. When you pay 420 rupees and you go to the Four Seasons for a cup of tea, now what are your expectations? Right? Pinstripe, white linen jacket, white linen napkin, beautiful tablecloth. The waiter should be impeccably groomed, showered, shaved, and should communicate with you effectively. So when you say, what do you suggest I have? Which green tea would you recommend? You don't expect him to give you a blank look. On the other hand, you expect appearance, behavior, and communication from him because you're paying more. So depending on what is the value of product that you're selling or the service that you're selling, always dress for your audience and never dress for yourself. I could have conducted the same session in jeans, t-shirt, and maybe a pair of track pants. You would have said, look at her telling us to dress formally. So I'm taking the effort to dress for my audience. And I think that should remain the rule, regardless of whether it's a face-to-face meeting or a Zoom meeting. Secondly, please activate the video. I think an integral element of communication is visual. And if you don't activate the video, your ability to build relationship goes down drastically. So when you're speaking, I would highly recommend that you activate the video, because it definitely adds a very, very important dimension to communication. I hope that answers your question.
Right. So we have, so the best 5 questions is when the Q&A session happens. So keep your questions till then. Yes. Let me kind of put this poll, take this poll, the next one, which is third one. My body language conveys interest and inspires trust. Yeah, just give me a second. Let me play this for you. Let me launch this poll. Yeah, so this is the poll. My body language conveys interest, inspires trust, and non-verbally conveys I'm serious, right? Your responses are never, sometimes, and always. Please use the chat box in case you're not able to access the poll. Use the chat box. We have about 60% who've taken the poll so far. It's 70%. So let's take about 10 seconds more. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Let me stop this poll and share the results. All right, so this is the results, which is 66% say they always do this. 32% say sometimes, and 2% say they never do this. Yeah, so let me stop sharing the results. Back to you, Sheetal.
Thank you. Thanks, Arun. So yes, I'm moving to the next letter, which is your online presence. This has become very critical in the last 1 year, or I would say 9 months of the lockdown. But more importantly, it has been important, in fact, for the last 10 years. People have really not focused on it. 20 years ago, if you were a leader, you did not need an online presence because life was controlled by a lot of media reports. You showed what you wanted to show, and life was very simple. It was not a fishbowl existence. Today, interestingly, life for a leader or a potential leader has become a fishbowl existence. And the sad part is that it can even derail your career based on what people see online. So, what is the importance of an online presence? I think it's very important that leaders, potential leaders, because people e-meet you before they meet you. And based on what they see on the screen, they form an opinion and pass a judgment. They decide whether they want to retain you. They decide whether they want to hire you. They decide whether they want to do business with you. And while addressing our millennials for a B school, they told me they even decide whether they want to date you or marry you. So clearly, personal professional life is dictated by a strong online presence. Leaders are completely aware of that and they curate it. Ultimately, we have to manage our own personal brand, and managing it online has become important. So if you punch your name into Google and see what shows up, that is what is going to form an opinion based on what other people sitting 10,000 kilometers away in another continent are going to form based on what they see. Even put your name into Google Images and see what are the images that show up. You actually may get shocked because of the fact that people have tagged you and you were not even aware of what you were tagged in. Just a few years ago, that option was not even available to request for tagging or to untag. So online presence is very important. And during the pandemic, we have noticed that we have done so much business with people that we have never really seen. And going forward, I have no idea what the world will look like. It may go back to normal. It may be a new normal. It may even be a hybrid where some people we meet in real life and most of them we don't meet in real life. So they are going to rely on your online presence. Why must you have a strong online presence? Because that is an influencer. The two portals which are very important and spoken about are LinkedIn and Twitter. I would like to add two more, which is professional would be Twitter and LinkedIn, and personal would be Facebook and Instagram. I'm not going to talk much about personal presence. All I'm going to do is to tell you that go to the right-hand side of each of these and understand the privacy settings and close it for outsiders. Because if your friends like to share something about you, and today we live in a very polarized world where there are a lot of political and religious views that people are sharing very openly, which is great. But you may not want your bosses, clients, seniors, juniors, vendors, and potential clients to actually hear and see those views. So my request to everybody is please go and close those to outsiders. So your inner circle can be privy to your thoughts, your views. So ask yourself to be knowledgeable, to be an expert. Do you want to be a leader? Do you want to go-to person? But definitely know that it is populated with the kind of information that you want the world to see. And that is important. So don't leave it to chance. I use a lot of social media for what I call as social listening. So for me, it's very notice that after writing this book, I took a with this session. I said, you know, the world has really become flat. Now you can do business with people from any part of the world. That's phenomenal. And after writing this book, Executive Presence Coaches, communication experts, 83 of them sitting in different parts of the world connected with me, bought my book, gave a review, good, bad, gave feedback. So I do believe that social media has really created a level playing field. So you can use it for social listening. You can use it for projecting your brand. You can also use it for vulnerability. My only request is that please stay away from too many religious and political discussions unless you are an activist or that is your area of expertise. because of the simple reason that there's too much of noise on that. And to me, that is a problem. And interestingly, when I was collecting data, that topic, that point emerged again and again. That one, leaders said, tell everybody not to share too much information about their personal life. We are not interested. Secondly, tell them to curate their online presence, because based on that, it creates a pull factor. Whether people want to give us business, or we want to retain or hire people in different parts of the world, or the fact that people actually draw interest, credibility, pass judgment on what they see of our employees. So I worked with a lot of senior professionals to help them curate their online presence. And I think that also became very important. Of course, it improves your visibility. I don't need to tell you that, but how to improve your visibility and how to get the correct visibility is also very important. So my simple suggestion is, write down 3 words that you want people to know you by. So if you want people to know you as a serious, knowledgeable, expert, then those are the 3 words that you write as on your screen or on your soft board. Go online and see, are you conveying that? Because if it is not synchronized by what you want to convey, there's going to be confusion and chaos. Any questions on online presence?
Yeah, so I think there are lots of them, but I'll just pick up whatever I can. It says,
yeah, sure.
Kashyap says, according to me, online presence would also mean how do you respond to mails, your response to social media, what you post and what you comment on others' posts.
Yes, I agree with you. In fact, I was going to include it in engagement presence, but because you brought it up, I think it's very important to understand your virtual presence. How do you appear on a screen? It could be something small like the frame. It could be something irrelevant according to you like clothes, but I think all of it matters. The lighting matters, the volume matters, the audio matters. Never in the history of the world has audio become more important than in today's times. So I think it's important. Secondly, what is very important is that when you're managing and influencing teams, who are sitting remote, could be sitting even a few kilometers away from your home. But the fact is that we've all gone remote. It is very important for leaders to understand that a skill which was not spoken about till now, but has become an important leadership skill, is vulnerability and empathy. I think this is the first time in the history of the world that we've actually seen the person behind the title. You could have seen an occasional family member or a pet or a doorbell or a pressure cooker going off, but no problem at all. That's fine because we all know we are working from home. But first time that we've actually seen people in their natural homes, settings, lives. So I think that's great, but empathy has to be shown. Empathy was only spoken about till today, but I think during the pandemic, it has emerged as a huge leadership skill. Going forward, we are going to expect leaders to be empathetic. I always say that leadership keeps changing. 3 decades ago, leaders were autocratic. They walked into a room, everybody stood up, called them sir and ma'am. About 20 years ago, thanks to globalization, Y2K, the world became a very different place. We started calling leaders by first name. But today, I think leadership has also changed. It has become much more collaborative. What ultimately is the role of a leader? Which brings me to my next point, which is influencer. What is the role of a leader? A leader is no longer somebody who's going to get you to do your work. Instead, he's a mentor, coach, guide, facilitator, and somebody who helps you do your work better. So the role of leadership has changed. I always joke, I said it's a lot like parenting. 20 years ago, parents also were autocratic. So I remember if I asked my dad for permission and I said, can I stay out till 10:30 when 10 o'clock was my deadline? He said, no. And that was the end of that conversation. I could never reply back. Of course, I could show a lot of anger by banging doors and skipping a meal and saying, I'm not hungry, I'm not going to eat dinner, which was good for my health in any case. But the fact was that I could never argue back and tell him why. That was not acceptable. You try the same trick with today's children, and I'm sure many of you have kids, teenagers. If you tell them, I'm sorry, you can't do it, or if you say no, your children are going to throw it right back at you and say, tell me 3 reasons why you are not allowing me to do this. And the ball comes back into your court. So I think leadership styles and parenting styles have kept pace with the changing world. But today, the role of a leader is somebody who's collaborative, somebody who sees himself as someone who inspires, motivates, and makes it easier for his team members to do well. So what are the leadership skills according to executive presence model which are important? The number one skill which has emerged is executive maturity. What to say, what not to say, how to say it, when to say it, and when to zip up is a very critical leadership skill. And lots of leaders spoke about it. They said that, especially during the current crisis, it has become even more important because there's so much fake news. There are rumors about everything floating around that today's leaders in the pandemic have had to communicate effectively, communicate facts, know what to say, when to say, also at times even over communicate so that they appear calm and people look at their leaders, because leadership in India especially is still a role on a pedestal, and we like to see our leaders in a particular light. So executive maturity somehow emerged as the number one skill when it came to influencer presence. Of course, the usuals like the authenticity, the ability to engage, the ability to inspire, the ability to focus on people became also very important. But one more skill which many leaders spoke about was listening skills. In a survey done of 50 nations, interestingly, as a nation, we were ranked at 49. Whenever I share this data in a classroom session, invariably somebody asks me, who was 50th, Miss Mehra? Was it Pakistan? Honestly, I don't know who was 50th, and honestly, I don't care, and I don't think it matters because I think 49 is bad enough. One, we don't listen. Two, when somebody is speaking, not only do we not listen, but we are doing one of two things. Either we are completely zoomed out and thinking of what we are going to do over the weekend or some task or errand that we have forgotten to do, or we are thinking of what we are going to say next. I do believe that an important way to show and build engagement and invite participation and generate the best of ideas, because you never know, they could come from the junior most person, and that is what is creativity and innovation in today's world, is to wear your listening skills hat. To listen, listen, and listen. And that is an important leadership skill. So I've shared tips and tricks in the book on how to develop listenings and how effective listening skills is for today's leader. Of course, interestingly, that goes with the fact that if you listen, you also listen to feedback. You also listen to what's gone wrong and what has gone right, what works, what doesn't work. So your ability to actually be intuitive also goes up drastically when you listen. Socially also, I've realized that when you listen to people, I personally think it's a best compliment that you can pay somebody. Because when you listen, somehow everybody loves to talk about themselves, and your engagement goes up drastically. Just three things: eye contact, a slight smile, and listening. And you can pretty much speak to anybody on this planet. So I think it's important to develop the listening skills. And that was something which was very interesting and emerged. One aspect, which is again related to our culture, is our inability to say no, which completely kills our time management. So leaders wanted me to put that in the book for all the readers, young professionals, star performers of corporate India, that we have to learn how to say no. No, but we should sugarcoat it. We should be a negotiated no. And how, as a culture, we are not very comfortable with a direct no. So that emerged very interestingly. Yes, going back to virtual presence, I think it's very important to understand that we are a very verbose culture. We like to talk to people. And I personally also miss my interaction in the office, because you walk into the office, you walk to the coffee machine, you speak to 3 people at the machine, 2 people on the way back. You go to the water cooler, you speak to 2 people at the water cooler, even conversations in corridors, in the washrooms, cafeteria. So there were so many wonderful informal conversations. As a culture, we like to connect with people. We like to exchange data. We like to exchange information. And interestingly, our colleagues know a lot about our life, formal, informal, personal, professional. On the other hand, in cultures which are monochronic, like a Germany or Scandinavian nations, you could be sitting in the next cubicle for 20 years, but people would not know Whether you are married, still married, how many children you have, where did you go for the weekend, or which is the next holiday that you're planning to take. On the other hand, when we see Indian workplaces, we are much more informal, connected. Even in my own office, I see young girls on Myntra website trying to figure out, should I buy small or should I buy extra small? And they're asking their next cubicle colleague that. So I think it's important to understand that we like connectivity. So for us, an important element which has emerged in this virtual world is that remote has become aloof, which is not something that's sitting well with all of us. Of course, punctuality, professionalism continues to be an important thing, as well as integrity. But what was important is understanding that in the virtual world, micromanaging has become passé. And that is something that bosses will have to align there. Because earlier, when you came to work from 10 to 7, you sat there, we assumed you were working. Today, the world has changed. It doesn't matter. You can work at your own time, own speed, own pace. But deliverables have to be done at a particular time. Deadlines have to be met. How you do it is something that you have to manage. So bosses have to learn that micromanaging has become passé. And the team members have to learn that there's nobody going to supervise them. And they have to self-motivate, self-discipline, and inculcate that self-discipline to deliver the results. So yes, it's an interesting mix in the modern new age influencer presence. So I'm going to take a break right now, and very quickly we can take a couple of questions, or if Arun wants to do the next poll question, we could do that as well.
Sure. Thank you, Sheetal. So I think there are a lot of questions. I think people are looking forward to the book. Yeah, so you have a lot more questions than I can take. But I'll just pick up one because random. Honestly, there's no bias, right? So please excuse me for whatever I could pick up. So there's one question by Avesh, Sheetal. It says, what about biases creeping in while filtering people on the basis of their dressing or online presence? You may be missing on good candidates and good people.
If you are not in a client interfacing role, it doesn't matter. But if you are in a client interfacing role, then I would say that there is a broad expectation that the client has from what the person across the table should be dressed. Now, this is 2020. Maybe by 2030, that expectation may change, because working in this area is like working with a moving target. The world is changing and constantly evolving. But as things stand today, we all have expectations. And the closer you are to the expectation, the higher your chances of success, and visuals do matter. Yes, you could be doing away, you could be missing out on a lot of talent. Back end office, it does not matter. People who are interacting on phone and email can generally be dressed as per your office dress code, it doesn't matter. But I do believe that if you're going to be client interfacing, and the top team constantly is client interfacing, the next level, which is being groomed for senior leadership, is also the face of the organization. I think it's very important. Honestly, if you take the top 10 people that run a company in India, or if you take the top 10 people that run the company globally, you will notice that when you put them in a room and photograph them, they almost look like clones of each other. And that, to some extent, is the visual part of organization culture. You have to fit in, you have to blend in. There are very, very many industries where you don't have to fit in or blend in. Like in the creative space, it doesn't matter. So when I do workshops at advertising, PR, media, publishing, entertainment, it doesn't really matter. In fact, the more different you are, the more creative you are. Let's look at it this way. In singing, if you're a young singer and you say, I sing just like Kishore Kumar, they will not give you even one song to sing. But if you say, I'm very different, and then you turn out to be Arijit Singh, who is very different, you have a place in the industry. So some industries, creative industries, is about how different you are. Whereas many traditional industries like legal, banking, financial services, consulting, management consulting, people expect you to be in a certain mold and appropriately dressed for your industry position level. So dress as per your industry, your job, and your level in the organization. And people have expectations, and so do you. Let's be honest. All of us have expectations. When you go to buy a top-end car, or you go to a luxury goods item, let's say you want to really spend and buy yourself a nice suit or a bag. If the person who is in the shop is wearing shorts or track pants and chappals and is trying to sell you a top end car, you would not like it. You also expect him to be impeccably groomed and speak and communicate and present himself in a particular way. So we do have expectations, but it is definitely determined by the industry. In fact, I would say, people say entrepreneurs don't need it. Let me tell you one thing. I've trained a lot of young investors. I've trained portfolio company CEOs where I've been retained by private equity firms because of the fact that it impacts even valuations. So people invest in people and not so much in an idea or a product. So it does matter. I hope I've answered your question.
So I'm sure we'll have more questions as we go through. I'll take the next poll, Sheetal.
Yeah.
Okay, so let me take the next one, which is, the fourth poll is being launched. Okay, here you are. When someone is speaking, I always maintain eye contact with the speaker, lean in to show interest and stay 100% engaged in the conversation. Yeah. So the responses are never, sometimes, and always. Please go ahead and take the poll. If you're not able to take the poll, use the chat box. 60% already taken this poll. And of course, we have close to 300 people, Sheetal. So it means an amazing session, and people are enjoying what's happening today. Okay. 80% have taken the poll. Okay, let me take 10 more seconds. It's 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I'm closing the poll. Almost 80% have taken this. So let me close the poll. Yeah, and these are the results, which is almost 70% they say always do this, and 30% say sometimes. Yeah, so I'm stop sharing the results. Back to you, Sheetal.
Thank you. Looks like we have a lot of people in the audience who have cracked the executive presence code. And yes, I look forward to the Q&A session after the coffee. So I'm going to move on to the next letter, which is stage presence. Since time immemorial, the job of a leader has always been to communicate in an articulate, effective way to his audience. Whether you were a king or you were a military general or you were, in any era in the history of the world, the job of a leader has always been to have an effective stage presence. I personally believe that the Indian academic system has failed corporate India. They don't teach you stage presence. Research shows that 93% of the population has ranked themselves as on the introvert spectrum, some part of the scale. Only 7% of people have said we are extroverts. When you take a class of 40 children, that translates to 2 children out of 40 being natural, born, gifted extroverts. Balance 38 are on somewhere on the shyness scale. Schools have a very low risk-taking ability. They don't take any chances. They identify those children at the age of 4 and 5. I was in the batch of 38. I was never in that 2. So I know what it feels like. How do they identify those children? Those are those very chirpy kids who say, Miss, can I wipe the board? Miss, can I go to the staff room and get the chalk? Miss, should I give out all the answer sheets? And those children for the next 14 years get all acting, dramatic, debates, elocution parts. And then children like me who are a part of the 38 sit on the floor permanently clapping while those kids get multiple chances to polish and upgrade their public speaking skills. But I do believe that public speaking is an effective, important, critical executive presence and leadership skill. The ability to articulate a thought and to convey it to your audience such that 80 to 90% of people understand your message in the first chance itself is a critical leadership skill. But what are the elements? One, of course, content, which there's only one word for it, and it is hard work. Practice, practice, practice. I know homework is a bad word. It sends goosebumps on an average kid. I mean, can you imagine your childhood without homework? It would have been phenomenal. It was a dream childhood. The only villain in the whole picture was homework. But you know something, there's no shortcut to it. So yes, you have to get the content correct. but I think delivery is equally important. Few areas that I noticed that Indians could upgrade. One, of course, was the fact that Indians speak English very fast. I tried researching on why we speak very fast. One, of course, is that Indian languages are naturally fast paced. So if you see like a Punjabi, Marathi, Tamil, Malayalam, you are speaking at breakneck speed, and that same speed you've transferred to English. English is a very cool, calm, composed language. Second, of course, again, I go back to the school life. In school, you never got a chance to speak up in a cool, calm, composed way. The minute your teacher said your name and maintained eye contact with you for like 1 second, you stood up like a jack in the box and started answering, blabbering, not even answering. Nobody had the luxury of getting up peacefully, looking around and saying, personally, in my opinion, and say. So in which case you spoke very quickly. So when somebody looks at you, you feel you have to blurt out the answer. Third, of course, is the fact that we don't have our media and news anchors are also speaking at like 500 words a minute, which is not healthy. And we have role models which are different. So in which case, I do believe that we need to change that. We need to speak slowly, calmly, and such that people can understand every word of what you're saying, because that's important. One, people can process it. Two, in our culture, we are very embarrassed to say, can you repeat that? I have sat through two years of calculus, not understanding a word. It was all Greek and Latin to me. I didn't understand what is going on, but I was so embarrassed and had such an ego that I couldn't get up and say, excuse me, can you repeat that, please? Because everybody would have looked at me and said, oh my God, this Sheetal, she is so dumb. So because I wanted to appear intelligent, I kept up this facade and really understood nothing. So we are very embarrassed to say, I'm sorry, I don't understand. So I think as a leader, you have to make sure that people understand what you're saying by speaking slowly. That's critical. Second element was voice. We have not been trained, but monotony is a very common disease in most public speakers. They make it so boring that sometimes you feel like telling them, listen, why don't you email the slides to me? I can see it, because honestly, you're not adding value. So we need to understand that there is a lot of acting when it comes to leadership. And there is a lot of acting when it comes to public speaking as well, because you have to make it interesting. You have to make it interactive. You have to have facial expressions, gestures, voice connotations, finer nuances. So it is a fine art. So start the journey and do not, for heaven's sake, make it monotonous, because it makes it awfully, awfully boring. So it is that you are on stage, whether it's a 4 people Zoom call, a 10 people conference room meeting, or a 500 people town hall. Make it fun. Make it interesting. Make it such that people want to listen. Otherwise, you have a lot of people who are sleeping with their eyes open. So I think people definitely need to understand that. Another important aspect which I understood and which a lot of leaders spoke about was pitch. High pitch naturally shows you are nervous, insecure, or what we call as an underling. On the other hand, low pitch shows that you're calm, cool, composed, can handle any crisis. Now, of course, there's a certain pitch that we are naturally born with. Sadly, women tend to be a little more high pitched because that is the way the voice box is structured. But I do believe that it's something that can be learned. The good thing with executive presence is that it's not a trait, but a skill. So it's something that is learnable and with effort can definitely be picked up, sharpened, polished, and delivered to the best of your ability. So yes, stage presence was important. So I'm going to take a quick break over here. And before I move to the last one, which is your engagement presence. Arun, have I gone over the time?
No, it's fine, Sheetal. I think it's very engaging. It's a lot of
Is
questions.
Everybody waiting for their cup of coffee and is looking at the watch?
No. I'm sure it's so engaging.
If you don't mind, I'm going to quickly go to the E, and then of course we'll re-engage in the
so one question
session.
here was about the introversion, right? I think that's what Mahesh said. It's not taking away anything from the value of what is being said. But there are introverts. Introverts can be very effective speakers, can have a great stage presence too.
I agree with you completely. I think, in fact, something, extroverted behavior has been worshipped for too long. But I feel introverts are think better power of observation. They make great leaders. They are good listeners. They network better. They engage better. They understand people better because they give the time and the energy. So I think going forward, introverted behavior definitely is going to be exalted and spoken about in detail. So I think it's a world of introverts now. The extroverts have had their time. Yes.
Great. So should we take the poll now or after this?
We
I think there's last
can do it after this. Yeah, I'll just finish the engagement presence. The
Okay.
engagement presence was spoken on two parameters. One was internal, the other one was external. So how do you engage with people internally? Whether it's relationship with your boss, relationship with your peers. One area that a lot of them spoke about is that how do people communicate with senior leadership? And that was important because senior leaders felt that 9 out of 10 people that they try speaking to or engaging with somehow clam up. So they don't know how to conduct conversation. Also, what is small talk? What is how to engage people? Another dimension that we spoke about, and it's a wonderful time to be an Indian. Indian companies have gone global, and global companies have understood the importance of having India in their set of businesses. So Indians are constantly connecting, interacting, negotiating, communicating, and doing tons of business with people sitting in different corners of the world. So cross-border communication also was covered in the book, and it has been very well appreciated and even in the reviews. So communicating with senior leaders. How do you communicate with people who are decision makers, whether they are internal, your super bosses, or external, could be a super boss of a client or a potential client. So leaders speak in bullet points. That was something which emerged. They are very concise in what they say. Time for them is very valuable. They don't like something very verbose. They are micro and macro at the same time. So if they want to elaborate on something, you better have the details. Also, they like people who engage. So all of them said that, you should tell future leaders that when they interact with people who are super senior, to come armed with a couple of questions which they can ask us at the end of the meeting, and that really matters. Externally, of course, it was interesting to know that you're a brand ambassador of your company and your country. Secondly, relationships matter. And networking is a very critical tool for improving your visibility. It's the fastest, cheapest, easiest way even to get business. So that matters. So what is likability quotient, and how likability quotient actually creates a pull factor when it comes to business and not a push factor. I would like to share my own experience. In the last 20 years of doing business, first 2 or 3 years, I never got any business because the subject that I was speaking about was alien to the Indian workplace. So people couldn't understand. Lots of people would say, yes, Miss Mehra, please come and teach, no problem at all. But do you want us to pay you? So they thought this was a wonderful free platform for Miss Mehra to practice her skills. Of course, later I didn't need to justify why I needed to be paid. But it was interesting. So I think what I really did right at that stage was that I met a lot of people. I engaged with a lot of people. People had questions and I would answer it for free. Once in a way, they would ask for some help. They would call me. I would answer that for free. And the interesting bit is 17, 18, 20 years later, so many people call me to give me business. Miss Mehra, you had come in 2001 to meet my boss in the Worli office. At that time, I was a junior executive HR. I also sat through your meeting. But now I'm the HR head of a very big chemicals company. And it'll be wonderful if you can come and address our leaders. So I think unknowingly, unwittingly, purely by default and not by design, I did end up creating a pull factor. So I think the important thing in networking is to understand that you need to give before you take. And that is important. Most people enter a networking arena or a meeting or a networking event thinking what they can get out of it. But you know something, if you can help people achieve their goals, if you can help them in areas that can help them get further, that will give you a credit balance and you can encash it, or they will themselves give you a gift card many, many years later. So I think there is a lot of goodness. And I think networking should be based on that. So on that note, I am done with the chapters of the book and the entire POISE formula. And I hand it back to you, Arun, to decide what is the next
All
you
right.
would like.
Okay. Thank you, Sheetal. What I'll do is probably take these 2 poll questions and then introduce the session that we have. So quickly, this is poll number 5. I'm launching a poll. The session is not over as yet, so don't worry. Please stay back because Sheetal is going to be here till another 45 minutes or so. So there's a question. I believe that first impressions are critical in business. When a new business associate enters the room, I stand up, extend a firm handshake, introduce myself and all my colleagues in the room, putting the person at ease. How many do you do this? It's never, sometimes, and always. 50% have taken the poll. The session is still not done, so please stay back. Yeah, of course, as I mentioned earlier, you get to win 5 copies of the book if you stay back till the end.
Yeah.
You could be lucky. Then I'm closing this poll. Yeah, so this is the results. So yeah, almost 70% seem to be already picking up your cues, Sheetal. So that's already happening well. And let me take the next poll, the last one here, which is in business, your visual resume matters. I try to ensure my clothes, grooming, accessories convey a polished image appropriately for my profession and my role as a leader in my industry. Okay, so fabulous. I guess almost 70% have taken. Yeah, 5 seconds more. All right, I am closing the poll. Here we are, and the results. Okay, almost 80% are doing this, which means that it's amazing that this has already happened. So great. Let me kind of